Now let's begin. The September sun hung low over the residential streets of Portland as Adrian Park pulled into his driveway, his Honda Civic's engine ticking as it cooled. He unbuckled his seatbelt and glanced in the rearview mirror at his son, Ethan, who sat quietly in his booster seat, eyes fixed on something outside the window. The boy had barely spoken during the 15-minute drive home from preschool. Adrian had noticed the change in Ethan over the past year. His once energetic 4-year-old had become withdrawn, prone to nightmares and sudden outbursts. The pediatrician suggested it was developmental, normal childhood anxiety. But Adrian knew better. He'd served 8 years in the Army, worked as a logistics coordinator now, and he understood when something was wrong. The problem was, he couldn't pinpoint the source. "Hey, buddy," Adrian said, turning around with a smile. "Ready to go inside? Mom's making spaghetti tonight." Ethan nodded slowly, his small fingers gripping the armrest. Adrian helped him out of the car seat, noticing how the boy's hand trembled slightly in his own. Inside their modest 2-story home, Lori Park stood at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables. She looked up as they entered, her auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, a tired smile on her face. "How was school?" she asked Ethan, bending down to kiss his forehead. The boy mumbled something unintelligible and headed straight for the living room, where his toys were scattered across the carpet. Lori's smile faded as she watched him go, then turned to Adrian with concern in her eyes. "He's been like this all week," she whispered. "Ever since we visited Mom." Adrian felt his jaw tighten. Sharon Robbins, Lori's mother, had been moved to Riverside Nursing Home 3 months ago after a stroke left her partially paralyzed. The woman had always been difficult, controlling, critical, with a sharp tongue that could cut through steel. But Lori was devoted to her, visiting every weekend, bringing Ethan along despite Adrian's protests. "Maybe we should stop taking him," Adrian suggested, not for the first time. "He's too young to understand what's happening with her condition." Lori shook her head. "She's his grandmother. Family is important." Adrian bit back his response. He'd learned early in their 6-year marriage that criticizing Sharon Robbins was a losing battle. Lori's father had died when she was 12, leaving Sharon to raise her alone. The bond between them was ironclad, even if Adrian thought it was toxic. That night, after Ethan was in bed, Adrian sat in his home office reviewing paperwork. Sharon's old farmhouse, a property 40 minutes outside the city, needed to be cleared out and sold to help cover the nursing home costs. The place had been in the Robbins family for 3 generations, a sprawling structure with peeling paint and overgrown grounds. Adrian had volunteered to handle the cleanup, hiring Clearview Property Services, a company specializing in estate cleanouts. The work was scheduled to begin Monday morning. Adrian planned to supervise the first day, make sure everything went smoothly. It would be a relief to have one less thing hanging over their heads. As he filed the contract away, he heard a sound from down the hall. A whimper, then a scream. Adrian bolted from his chair, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into Ethan's room to find the boy sitting upright in bed, tears streaming down his face, his small body shaking. "No, no, no," Ethan sobbed. The room. The dark room. Adrian gathered his son into his arms, feeling the rapid thump of the child's heart against his chest. "Sure, it's okay. You're safe. It was just a bad dream." "The dark room," Ethan repeated, his voice barely audible. "Grandma's house. The dark room." Lori appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Another nightmare?" Adrian nodded, rocking Ethan gently. But something cold had settled in his stomach. The dark room. Ethan had said those words before, always after visiting the farmhouse. Adrian had assumed it was the basement or attic that had scared him. Old houses were creepy to kids. But the terror in his son's voice suggested something else entirely. "I'll stay with him," Adrian told Lori. "You go back to bed." She hesitated, then nodded, too exhausted to argue. After she left, Adrian lay down next to Ethan, keeping the bedside lamp on. He watched his son's breathing slowly even out, but sleep eluded him. His mind kept circling back to those words. The dark room. What had happened in that house? Monday morning arrived with overcast skies and the promise of rain. Adrian dropped Ethan at preschool, noting how the boy clung to him longer than usual at the entrance. Miss Carolyn, the teacher, gave Adrian a concerned look but said nothing. Ethan had been acting out in class too, refusing to participate, hiding under tables during group activities. The drive to Sharon's farmhouse took 45 minutes through winding country roads. The property sat on 5 acres of land, isolated from neighbors by dense trees and neglect. As Adrian pulled up the gravel driveway, he saw the Clearview Property Services truck already parked near the sagging front porch. 3 men in work clothes were unloading equipment. The foreman, a stocky man named Russ Wolf with graying temples and weathered hands, approached as Adrian got out of his car. They'd spoken on the phone, but never met in person. "Mr. Park," Russ said, extending his hand. "We're ready to get started. Figure we'll begin upstairs, work our way down. Place is in rough shape." "I appreciate you taking this on," Adrian replied. "My mother-in-law wasn't much for maintenance in her later years." They walked through the house together. The interior was dim and musty, furniture covered in dust sheets, wallpaper peeling in the corners. Sharon had lived here alone for 15 years after retiring from her job as a school administrator. The isolation suited her, Lori always said. Sharon preferred her own company. Adrian showed Russ the layout. 4 bedrooms upstairs, living room, kitchen, and dining room on the main floor, and a basement that served as storage. Sharon's bedroom was at the end of the upstairs hallway, the largest room with windows overlooking the back acreage. "We'll be careful with any personal items," Russ assured him. "Pack them separate for you to go through." Adrian nodded and left them to their work. He had to get to his office for a meeting at 11. "Call if you need anything," he told Russ before heading out. He made it halfway through his meeting when his phone buzzed. Adrian glanced at the screen. Russ Wolf. He excused himself and stepped into the hallway. "Russ, what's up?" There was a pause, then Russ's voice, tight and strained. "Sir, I need you to come back here immediately. We found something in her room. Behind the wall." Adrian's pulse quickened. "What kind of something?" "I can't explain over the phone. Just, don't bring your wife. And maybe call the police." The line went dead. Adrian drove back to the farmhouse in a daze, his hands gripping the steering wheel, so tight his knuckles went white. "Don't bring your wife. Maybe call the police." The words echoed in his head, each repetition ratcheting up his dread. What could possibly be behind a wall in Sharon Robbins's bedroom? The property looked the same as when he'd left it 2 hours ago, but everything felt different now. Sinister. Adrian parked and walked to the front door, where Russ waited on the porch, his face ashen. "I'm sorry to pull you away from work," Russ said quietly, "but you needed to see this yourself." "Show me." They climbed the stairs in silence. The other workers were nowhere to be seen. Russ must have sent them outside. The farmhouse creaked around them, old boards settling. At the end of the hallway, Sharon's bedroom door stood open. The room was large, sparsely furnished. A metal bed frame, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a wardrobe that looked like it belonged in a Victorian novel. But Adrian's attention went immediately to the far wall, where Russ had removed a section of the faded floral wallpaper. Behind it, someone had cut a crude doorway into the wall itself, then covered it with a thin sheet of painted plywood that matched the wallpaper pattern. Now that plywood leaned against the dresser, revealing a dark space beyond. "We noticed the wall sounded hollow when we were moving the wardrobe," Russ explained. "Thought maybe it was a closet someone had sealed up. Old houses, you know, people do renovations. But then we pried it open and..." He gestured toward the opening. Adrian pulled out his phone, activated the flashlight, and stepped closer. The beam illuminated a small room, roughly 6 feet by 8 feet. No windows. The walls were bare drywall, and the floor was concrete. But it was what lined the walls that made Adrian's blood run cold. Photographs. Dozens of them, tacked up in neat rows. All of children. Different ages, different faces, but all showing the same thing. Kids in various states of distress. Some crying, some with vacant expressions, some bound. And in several of the photos, partially visible in the corner of the frame, was an older woman's hand. Rings on the fingers that Adrian recognized. He'd seen Lori wear her grandmother's ring set, the ones she'd inherited from Sharon's mother. His stomach lurched. He stumbled back from the opening, nearly colliding with Russ. "There's more," Russ said grimly. On the floor, Adrian forced himself to look again. In the far corner of the hidden room sat a cardboard box. His flashlight beam caught the edge of something inside. Videotapes, the old VHS kind. There had to be 20 or 30 of them, each labeled with dates spanning decades. The earliest he could make out was from 1987. 38 years of evidence. "Jesus Christ," Adrian whispered. "There's also this." Russ held up a small key he'd found taped to the inside of the doorway. I think it might go to something in the basement. There's a locked cabinet down there we couldn't open. Adrian's mind raced. Sharon Robbins had been a school administrator. She'd worked with children for 40 years. And all that time she'd been, what? Abusing them. Documenting it. The scope of it was staggering. And Ethan, his son, the darkroom. Did she bring him in here? Adrian asked, his voice breaking. Did she bring my son into this room? Russ looked away. I don't know, sir. But those fresher photos, some of them can't be more than a year or two old. Adrian pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He should call the police. This was evidence of serious crimes. Child abuse, maybe worse. But before he could dial, another thought struck him. If the police came now, this would explode into a media circus. Investigations, trials, Lori's family name dragged through the mud. And Sharon, weak and paralyzed in that nursing home, might never face real justice. The system would take over, and Adrian would lose control of the narrative. More importantly, he needed to know the full extent of what had happened to Ethan. He needed to understand everything before this became public. Give me the key, Adrian said. Russ handed it over without question. Adrian descended the stairs to the basement, each step feeling heavier than the last. The basement was unfinished, with exposed beams and a musty smell of earth and decay. Against the far wall stood a tall metal cabinet with a padlock. The key fit perfectly. Inside, Adrian found filing boxes organized by year. Each box contained folders with children's names, ages, and detailed notes in Sharon's precise handwriting. There were receipts too, payments made to Sharon from various sources. Some were labeled as consultation fees or private tutoring, but the amounts were substantial. Thousands of dollars over the years. She'd been paid to do this. This wasn't just abuse. It was systematic, commercial exploitation. Adrian's hands trembled as he pulled out the folder marked Ethan Park, age 4. Inside were photographs of his son in that dark room, crying, reaching toward the camera. The dates matched the weekends Lori had brought him to visit. There were notes too, clinical observations about Ethan's reactions, his fear responses. The rage that filled Adrian was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. This woman, this monster who'd smiled at family dinners and accepted Mother's Day gifts, had tortured his child, had tortured countless children. And she'd documented it all with the cold precision of a researcher conducting an experiment. He carefully photographed every page in Ethan's folder with his phone, then did the same with several others. The names meant nothing to him, but each one represented a victim, a child whose life Sharon had damaged. When he climbed back upstairs, Russ was waiting in the kitchen. What do you want me to do? The foreman asked. Adrian thought for a long moment. The smart move was to call the police right now. But smart wasn't what he wanted. He wanted Sharon Robbins to suffer the way these children had suffered. He wanted her to feel fear and helplessness. He wanted justice that went beyond a courtroom. Can you seal that room back up? Adrian asked. Exactly as it was? Russ's eyes widened. Sir, I don't think. I need time. Adrian cut him off. Time to figure out how to handle this. If the police come now, Sharon's in a nursing home. She'll claim dementia, incompetence. She'll never see the inside of a real cell. But if I do this right, if I gather everything and present it the right way, she'll have no escape. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it also wasn't the whole truth. What Adrian really wanted was to make Sharon pay on his terms, not the system's. Russ studied him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I've got a daughter, 8 years old. If someone did this to her, he trailed off. I'll seal it up, and I'll keep my mouth shut. But you better know what you're doing. I do, Adrian said, though he wasn't sure that was true. As Russ went back upstairs to restore the wall, Adrian stood in the farmhouse kitchen, his mind already working through the angles. He needed more information. He needed to understand Sharon's network, who had paid her, how she'd operated for so long without detection. And he needed to do all of this without alerting Lori, his wife. God, what would this do to her when she found out? Lori idolized her mother. Learning that Sharon was a monster would destroy her. But Ethan came first. His son's safety and healing came before everything else, even Lori's feelings. Adrian made a decision then, standing in that dark kitchen. He would investigate this himself. He would find out everyone involved. And then he would make sure Sharon Robbins and anyone who'd helped her paid a price that the law could never exact. The war planner in him, the soldier who'd coordinated complex operations in hostile territory, began mapping out his campaign. This wouldn't be quick. It would require patience, intelligence gathering, and precise execution. But when it was over, Sharon Robbins would wish she'd never met Adrian Park. That evening, Adrian sat in his home office with the door locked, his laptop open, Ethan's folder photographs displayed on the screen. Each image was a knife to his heart, but he forced himself to look, to catalog, to understand. He'd set up an encrypted cloud storage account and uploaded everything he'd photographed from the basement. Downstairs, he could hear Lori giving Ethan a bath, her voice singing a lullaby. The normalcy of it felt obscene against what he now knew. His phone buzzed. A text from Russ Wolf. Walls sealed. Looks like it was never touched. Good luck with whatever you're planning. Adrian deleted the message and began his research. Sharon Robbins had worked at Lincoln Elementary School for 25 years, retiring in 2010. Before that, she'd been at other schools, always in administrative roles with access to student records and private spaces. He cross-referenced the names from the basement files with missing children cases in the Portland area over the past 4 decades. 3 matches came up immediately. Children who'd vanished without a trace, their cases gone cold. All 3 had attended schools where Sharon worked. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. This was bigger than he'd thought. Sharon wasn't just abusing children. She might have been involved in trafficking or worse. He needed help, but he couldn't go to the police. Not yet. He needed someone with investigative skills who operated outside official channels. Someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. After an hour of searching, Adrian found his answer. Kent Fields, a private investigator who'd been recommended on a military veterans forum. Kent was former Army CID, Criminal Investigation Division, with a reputation for discretion and results. His specialty was cases involving crimes against children. He'd lost his own daughter to an abduction 15 years ago, never solved. Adrian sent an encrypted email, brief and to the point. Need help with a sensitive investigation. Child abuse, possible trafficking network. Time sensitive. We'll pay your rate plus expenses. The response came within 20 minutes. Coffee tomorrow, 9 a.m. Riverside Cafe downtown. Come alone. Adrian closed his laptop and sat in the darkness, listening to his family move through their evening routine. Ethan's voice drifted up from downstairs, protesting bedtime. Lori's patient response. He'd promised to protect them when he married Lori. When Ethan was born, Adrian had held his son and sworn nothing would ever hurt him. He'd failed. For a year, maybe longer, Sharon had been abusing Ethan, and Adrian hadn't known. Hadn't stopped it. That failure burned in his chest like acid. But he would fix it. He would make this right, no matter what it cost. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Lori. Are you coming to bed? Adrian took a breath, composed himself, and typed back, soon. Just finishing some work. He allowed himself 5 more minutes to sit with the rage and grief, then locked it away in the part of himself that had survived war zones and seeing friends die. That part could hold anything. It had to. Because tomorrow, the real work began. Riverside Cafe occupied a corner building in Portland's Pearl District, the kind of place where freelancers nursed lattes for hours. Adrian arrived 10 minutes early, ordered black coffee, and chose a table with a view of the entrance. Kent Fields walked in precisely at 9 a.m. He was in his 50s, tall and lean, with close-cropped gray hair and the watchful eyes of someone who'd seen too much. He spotted Adrian immediately. Maybe the military bearing gave them both away, and slid into the chair across from him. Kent Fields, he said, offering his hand. Adrian Park. Thanks for meeting me. Kent ordered an espresso from a passing server, then leaned back and studied Adrian. Your email was sparse on details. Why don't you fill me in? Adrian had prepared for this conversation, decided how much to reveal. He couldn't show Kent everything, not yet. But he needed the man's expertise. My mother-in-law is in a nursing home, Adrian began. While cleaning out her farmhouse, we found evidence that she'd been abusing children for decades. Photographs, videos, detailed records, including my 4-year-old son. Kent's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his gaze. You've contacted the authorities? Not yet. Why not? Adrian met his eyes. Because I want to understand the full scope first. Who was involved? How it operated? And I want to make sure everyone responsible pays. The law. The law will put a sick old woman in a facility that's barely different from the nursing home she's already in, Adrian interrupted. That's not justice. That's bureaucracy. Kent was silent for a moment, his fingers drumming on the table. What you're describing is vigilante action. I can't be part of anything illegal. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to investigate. Find the connections, the network. Give me information. What I do with it is my decision. And if I say no, then I'll do it myself and probably fuck it up, Adrian said bluntly. Look, I know your background. I know what happened to your daughter. I'm not asking you to compromise your principles. I'm asking you to help me protect my son and find out who else hurt these kids. Kent's jaw tightened at the mention of his daughter. He looked away, out the window at the morning traffic. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. Show me what you have. Adrian pulled out his phone and opened the encrypted photos. He slid it across the table. Kent's face went through several expressions as he scrolled. Shock, disgust, and finally, cold fury. Jesus, Kent breathed. This is organized. Professional. I know. The basement had files going back to 1987. Names, dates, payment records. Some of the children match cold missing person cases. Kent looked up sharply. Which ones? Adrian had anticipated this question. He named the 3 he'd identified. Kent's hands stilled on the phone. I worked one of those cases, he said quietly. Melissa Torres, vanished in 1993. 8 years old. We had no leads, no suspects. Her mother still calls me every year on the anniversary. Sharon Robbins was working at Melissa's school when she disappeared, Adrian said. I found her name in the files. Kent closed his eyes. When he opened them, the decision was made. I'll help you. But we do this smart. We build a case so airtight that everyone involved goes down, not just your mother-in-law. Agreed. And eventually, we do turn this over to the authorities. I want these people in prison. Adrian nodded, though he had his own plans for Sharon specifically. What's your rate? For this? Nothing. Consider it pro bono. Kent slid the phone back across the table. But I need full access to everything you found. And I need you to be straight with me. No holding back. Deal. They spent the next hour going through the details. Kent took notes, asked sharp questions, and began forming an investigative strategy. He had contacts in law enforcement, social services, and the dark web where this kind of material often circulated. He could trace the money, identify the buyers, and build a comprehensive picture of Sharon's operation. This is going to take time, Kent warned. Weeks, maybe months. Can you keep this quiet that long? I have to, Adrian said. My wife doesn't know yet. I'm not sure how to tell her. Kent's expression softened slightly. That's going to be the hardest part. When she finds out what her mother did. I know, but Ethan comes first. He's having nightmares, anxiety. I need to get him into therapy without explaining why yet. Can you recommend someone? Dr. Janelle Mann, child psychologist, specializes in trauma. She's discreet and won't push if you say you can't reveal details yet. Kent wrote down a number. Tell her I referred you. They parted ways with a plan. Kent would start running down the names in Sharon's files, tracking payment sources, and looking for connections to other abuse networks. Adrian would maintain his normal routine, visit Sharon at the nursing home to keep up appearances, and secretly prepare for the moment when he would spring his trap. As Adrian drove home, his phone rang. Lori. Hey, he answered, keeping his voice casual. What's up? I just got a call from Riverside Nursing Home, Lori said. Her voice was strained. Mom had another stroke last night. A bad one. They're saying it's time to start thinking about end-of-life decisions. Adrian felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. Sharon Robbins was dying. The universe had its own sense of timing. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. Sorry for Lori, not for Sharon. Do you want me to meet you there? Would you? I know you and Mom never got along, but I could use the support. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He hung up and changed course, heading toward the nursing home. This was an unexpected development, but Adrian was adaptable. He'd learned in the military that no plan survived first contact with the enemy. If Sharon was dying, he'd have to accelerate his timeline. He'd have to make sure she understood what was coming before the end. Because Adrian Park wasn't the kind of man to let his enemy escape into the peace of death without first showing them exactly what they'd lost. Riverside Nursing Home smelled of disinfectant and decay, a combination Adrian had come to associate with institutional end-of-life care. He found Lori in the hallway outside Sharon's room, her eyes red from crying, clutching a tissue. They've got her on comfort measures now, Lori said as Adrian put his arm around her. The doctor said it could be hours or days, but her brain function is minimal. I'm sorry, Adrian repeated, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. They entered the room together. Sharon Robbins lay in the hospital bed, her face slack, a breathing tube inserted in her nose. Monitors beeped softly. She looked smaller than Adrian remembered, shrunken and fragile. Lori pulled a chair close to the bed and took her mother's hand. Hey, Mom. It's me. Adrian's here too. No response. Sharon's eyes were closed, her chest rising and falling with mechanical rhythm. Adrian stood back, studying the woman who'd caused so much pain. He felt nothing for her suffering. If anything, he resented that she might die before he could make her pay properly. I'll give you some time alone, he told Lori. I'm going to get some coffee. She nodded without looking up, focused entirely on her mother. Adrian left the room and walked down the hall to a small visitor's lounge. He pulled out his phone and called Kent Fields. Sharon's dying, he said without preamble. Multiple strokes. They're saying hours or days. Kent was quiet for a moment. That complicates things. Without her testimony, building a case against the broader network gets harder. Can you accelerate the investigation? I can try. But Adrian, even if she dies, the evidence exists. We can still bring the others down. It's not enough, Adrian said, his voice low and hard. I need her to know. I need her to understand that we found everything, that her legacy is destroyed, that she failed. She's comatose. She probably can't hear you. Maybe. Or maybe there's some part of her still in there, aware. Adrian watched an elderly couple shuffle past the lounge, the man supporting the woman with infinite patience. I'm going to tell her anyway. Adrian. Thanks for your help, Kent. Keep digging. I'll be in touch. He ended the call and returned to Sharon's room. Lori was still holding her mother's hand, speaking softly about memories from childhood. Happy times that now felt contaminated by what Adrian knew. After an hour, Lori stood and stretched. I need to use the restroom. Will you stay with her? Of course. As soon as Lori left, Adrian moved closer to the bed. He leaned down, his face inches from Sharon's, and spoke in a whisper that carried all the fury he'd been containing. I found your little room, Sharon. Behind the wall. I saw the photographs, the videos, the files. I know what you did to Ethan. I know what you did to all of them. No reaction. The monitors continued their steady beeping. You thought you'd get away with it. Thought you'd die peacefully with your daughter holding your hand, never facing consequences. But I'm going to make sure everyone knows. Every parent of every child you hurt. The police. The media. Your name will become synonymous with evil. He straightened up, watching for any sign that his words had penetrated. Sharon's eyelids flickered. Just once, but it was enough. She'd heard him. That's right, Adrian said softly. You can't hide anymore. And whatever peace you thought you'd find in death, you won't get it. I'll make sure of that. The door opened. Lori returned, and Adrian stepped back, his expression carefully neutral. Any change? She asked. No. Still the same. They stayed another hour before the doctor suggested they go home, promising to call if Sharon's condition changed. On the drive back, Lori cried quietly, mourning the mother she thought she knew. Adrian said nothing, his hands steady on the wheel, his mind already planning his next move. Dr. Janelle Mann's office was in a renovated Victorian house near the university, the kind of place designed to feel non-threatening to children. Adrian had called ahead, using Kent's name as a reference, and she'd agreed to see Ethan that same week. Now Adrian sat in the waiting room while Ethan was in session, watching through the one-way glass as the boy played with toys on the floor. Dr. Mann, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair, sat nearby, occasionally asking questions. After 30 minutes, she came out to the waiting room. Mr. Park, can we talk in my office? They moved to a smaller room lined with books and certificates. Dr. Mann gestured for him to sit. Ethan is displaying classic signs of trauma, she said without preamble. Avoidance behaviors, hypervigilance, night terrors. He mentioned a dark room several times during our session, always in the context of his grandmother's house. Adrian's jaw clenched. What else did he say? Not much. He's very guarded. But I'd like to see him twice a week for the next month, build trust. With your permission, I may eventually ask him to draw or use play therapy to help him express what happened. Do what you need to do, Adrian said. Just help him. Dr. Mann studied him. Kent Fields told me you might be dealing with a complicated situation. I want you to know that if I suspect ongoing abuse, I'm a mandatory reporter. I have to contact the authorities. The source of the abuse is neutralized, Adrian said carefully. She's in a nursing home, dying. She can't hurt him anymore. Good. But Ethan will need long-term support. Trauma doesn't disappear overnight. They discussed treatment plans and coping strategies. Dr. Mann gave Adrian resources for explaining things to Ethan in age-appropriate ways when the time came. As Adrian left with his son, he felt a small measure of relief. At least Ethan would get the help he needed. That evening, after Ethan was asleep, Adrian sat down with Lori. She looked exhausted, her face drawn from days of vigil at the nursing home. "We need to talk," Adrian said gently. Lori looked up from her tea. "Is this about Mom?" The doctor said she might only have a few more days. "Partly, but also about Ethan." Adrian chose his words carefully. "I've been worried about his nightmares and behavior. I found a child psychologist who specializes in anxiety. I took him to see her today." Lori frowned. "You didn't ask me first?" "I know. I'm sorry. But he needed help, and you've had so much on your plate with your mom." Her expression softened. "What did the doctor say?" "That he's dealing with trauma. She thinks something at your mom's house scared him badly. Maybe the isolation, the old building. She wants to see him regularly." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough for now. Lori nodded slowly. "I noticed he always got upset after visiting. I thought he was just being difficult. Kids process things differently," Adrian said. "The important thing is that he's getting help now." Lori reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you for taking care of this. For taking care of him when I've been distracted." Guilt flickered through Adrian. Guilt over his deception, over what he was about to destroy in Lori's life. But he pushed it down. Protecting Ethan came first. Always. His phone buzzed. A text from Kent. "Found something. Call me when you're alone." Adrian squeezed Lori's hand and stood. "I need to make a work call. You okay?" "Yeah. I'm going to bed soon anyway." He kissed her forehead and went to his office, closing the door before dialing Kent. "What did you find?" Adrian asked. "Payment trail," Kent said. Sharon received regular deposits from an offshore account linked to a company called Sunshine Consulting. That company's been flagged by FBI in the past for suspected involvement in CSAM distribution networks. CSAM, child sexual abuse material. Adrian felt sick. "There's more," Kent continued. "I cross-referenced the names in Sharon's files with Sunshine Consulting's known associates. 3 matches. All connected to a man named Dominic Beasley. He runs what looks like a legitimate photography business in Seattle, but my sources say he's a major distributor." "Have you contacted the FBI?" "Not yet. I wanted to check with you first. If we bring them in now, they'll take over the investigation. Sharon will be a small fish. But if we can get more evidence directly linking Beasley to Sharon's operation, we can make sure he goes down too." Adrian paced his office. "How do we get that evidence?" "Sharon's videos. If even one of them features Beasley or can be traced to him, we've got a direct connection. But accessing those tapes is risky. You'd be handling evidence, potentially contaminating a future case. I don't care about the legal technicalities. Tell me what you need." Kent sighed. "I need you to get those tapes from the farmhouse. Bring them to me. I have equipment to digitize them safely and check for identifying markers." "But Adrian, this crosses a line. You'd be concealing evidence." "For a few more days," Adrian corrected. "Long enough to build the case properly. Then we hand everything over." A pause. "Your call. But be careful." Adrian ended the call and sat in darkness, thinking. The farmhouse was 45 minutes away. He could go tomorrow while Lori was at the nursing home, retrieve the tapes, and deliver them to Kent. It would take a few hours at most. The risk was minimal. The reward, ensuring everyone in Sharon's network faced justice, was worth it. He opened his laptop and sent an email to his boss, requesting a personal day for family reasons. Then he lay down on the couch in his office, too wired to sleep, his mind running through every detail of tomorrow's mission. By dawn, he had a plan. The next morning, Adrian waited until Lori left for Riverside Nursing Home before loading Ethan into the car. He dropped his son at preschool, then drove to the farmhouse under gray skies that threatened rain. The property looked abandoned now, the cleanup crew long gone. Adrian unlocked the front door and stepped into the musty silence. He brought a duffel bag and latex gloves, determined to leave no trace of his presence. Upstairs, he carefully removed the section of wallpaper Russ had resealed, exposing the hidden room once more. The photographs still lined the walls, their subjects frozen in moments of fear and pain. Adrian forced himself not to look at them as he gathered the box of tapes. 37 VHS cassettes, each labeled with dates. The weight of them in the duffel bag felt obscene. He was sealing the wall back up when he heard it, a car door slamming outside. Adrian froze. He moved to the window and looked down. A dark sedan sat in the driveway, and a man was walking toward the house. Not a car he recognized. Shit. Adrian quickly finished reattaching the wallpaper, then grabbed the duffel bag and moved to the hallway. He could hear footsteps on the porch, then the sound of the front door opening. Someone with a key. He descended the stairs quietly, staying close to the wall to avoid creaks. As he reached the main floor, he saw the intruder, a man in his 60s, heavy-set, wearing an expensive suit. The man stopped when he saw Adrian. "Who the hell are you?" the stranger demanded. Adrian set down the duffel bag casually, his military training kicking in. Assess the threat. Control the situation. I could ask you the same thing. This is private property. I'm Richard Kramer, Sharon Robbins' attorney. I have every right to be here. Kramer's eyes narrowed. You're the son-in-law. Park, right? That's right. And I have authorization from my wife to handle the estate. Not according to Sharon's power of attorney. I need to inventory certain items before anything is removed. Kramer's gaze fell on the duffel bag. What's in there? Personal effects, Adrian said evenly. I'll need to verify that. Adrian didn't move. No. Kramer's face reddened. Listen, Mr. Park, I don't know what you think you're doing, but Sharon was very specific about certain items in this house. Items that need to be properly disposed of. Understanding dawned. Kramer knew. He'd known about Sharon's activities, had probably helped cover them up for years. Items like photographs. Adrian asked quietly. Videos? Files documenting decades of child abuse. Kramer's expression shifted from anger to calculation. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. That's why you rushed over here the moment Sharon's health declined. To clean up her mess before anyone found it. Be very careful with accusations, Kramer said. I'm an officer of the court. And an accomplice to child trafficking. Adrian shot back. Did she pay you well for your silence? Or were you one of her clients? Kramer's hand moved toward his pocket. Adrian reacted instantly, closing the distance and grabbing the man's wrist. A brief struggle. Then Adrian had Kramer against the wall, the lawyer's phone clattering to the floor. Here's what's going to happen, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. You're going to leave. You're going to forget you saw me here. And if you contact anyone about this, I'll make sure everything I found in this house gets sent to the State Bar Association, the FBI, and every news outlet in Oregon. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Kramer wheezed. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who enabled a predator. Adrian released him and stepped back. Get out. Kramer adjusted his suit, breathing hard. He picked up his phone and glared at Adrian. This isn't over. You're right. It's just beginning. After Kramer left, Adrian waited 10 minutes to make sure the lawyer wasn't calling the police, then carried the duffel bag to his car. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline draining. He'd just made an enemy, someone who had resources and connections. But he'd also confirmed something crucial. Sharon's operation had protection. Kramer was proof that this went beyond one sick woman. There was a network, and Adrian had just kicked the hornet's nest. He drove to Kent's office, a small suite above a Thai restaurant in Northeast Portland. Kent took one look at Adrian's face and ushered him inside. What happened? Adrian explained the confrontation with Kramer. Kent's expression darkened. Richard Kramer. I know that name. He's represented several clients in cases involving allegations of child exploitation. Always gets charges dismissed or reduced. I've long suspected he was dirty. He as much as admitted it, Adrian said. He's part of this. Kent took the duffel bag and set it on his desk. This changes things. If Kramer knows you have evidence, he'll try to discredit you or make the evidence disappear. We need to move faster. How fast? I've already contacted an FBI agent I trust. Special Agent Luther Sanderson. He's in the Crimes Against Children unit. I can bring him in now. Turn everything over. Adrian felt a surge of frustration. I wanted more time. I wanted to make sure they all pay. They will, Kent said firmly. But not if we get charged with obstruction. Let me call Sanderson. We'll turn over everything. The tapes, the photos, Sharon's files. We'll tell him about Kramer and Beasley. The Bureau will handle it from here. Adrian knew Kent was right, but it felt like losing control. Handing his revenge over to people who might not care as much might let some of these monsters slip through the cracks. What about Sharon? Adrian asked. She's dying. She might not live long enough to face charges. Kent's expression was grim. Then she faces judgment elsewhere. But the others will pay. I promise you that. Adrian nodded slowly. Make the call. While Kent contacted Agent Sanderson, Adrian sat in the office and thought about what came next. The investigation would become public. Lori would learn the truth about her mother. Their marriage would be tested in ways Adrian couldn't predict. But Ethan would be safe. The children in those files would get justice. And the network that had enabled Sharon Robbins would be destroyed. It wasn't the revenge Adrian had wanted, swift, personal, brutal. But maybe it was better. Maybe letting the law do its job was the right move after all. Or maybe, Adrian thought as Kent scheduled a meeting with the FBI for that afternoon, he'd find a way to ensure Sharon's final days were filled with the fear and helplessness her victims had felt. There was more than one kind of justice. The FBI field office occupied a nondescript building downtown, all concrete and security checkpoints. Adrian and Kent were escorted to a conference room where Special Agent Luther Sanderson waited, a lean man in his 40s with sharp features and intelligent eyes. Mr. Park, Mr. Fields, Sanderson said, shaking their hands. Kent gave me a brief overview, but I need to hear everything from the beginning. For the next 2 hours, Adrian recounted the discovery at the farmhouse, showed the photographs he'd taken, and explained Sharon's filing system. Kent added his findings about the payment trails and connections to Dominic Beasley and Richard Kramer. Sanderson's expression remained professionally neutral throughout, but Adrian caught the tightening around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched when viewing images of the hidden room. This is significant, Sanderson finally said. We've been investigating a network for years, but we've never had this level of documentation. Mrs. Robbins kept meticulous records. Can you build a case? Adrian asked. Absolutely. We'll need to seize the evidence formally, get search warrants for the farmhouse and Mrs. Robbins's nursing home room. We'll bring in Kramer and Beasley for questioning. Sanderson paused. I have to ask, why didn't you contact us immediately when you found this? Kent answered before Adrian could. My fault. I advised Mr. Park to gather more information first to ensure we had the full picture. In retrospect, that was a mistake. It was a lie, a cover story they'd agreed on. Sanderson seemed to buy it. Just so we're clear, the agent said, you cannot access that farmhouse again. It's now part of an active investigation. We'll get a warrant and secure it within the hour. Understood, Adrian said. What about my son? He kept his voice steady. He's one of the victims. How do we protect him through this? Sanderson's expression softened. We have protocols for child victims. We'll need to interview him eventually, but we'll work with his therapist to minimize trauma. And his identity will be protected from media. Small comfort. But it was something. As the meeting concluded, Sanderson stood. Mr. Park, I want you to know we take this seriously. Everyone involved in this network will be held accountable. Including Sharon Robbins? Even if she's incapacitated, we'll pursue charges. There's no statute of limitations on these crimes. If she recovers enough to stand trial, she will. If not, Sanderson shrugged. Sometimes the consequences aren't what we hope for, but we'll make sure her co-conspirators face justice. It wasn't enough, but Adrian shook the agent's hand and left. Outside, Kent walked with him to the parking garage. You okay? No, Adrian said honestly. I keep thinking I should feel relieved. The FBI is involved. They'll handle it. But all I feel is cheated. Cheated how? Sharon gets to die peacefully, probably before she's even charged. Kramer will lawyer up and maybe avoid serious time. And none of them will truly suffer the way their victims did. Kent stopped walking and turned to face him. Listen to me. What you're feeling is normal. When my daughter was taken, I wanted to tear apart the world looking for who did it. I wanted them to hurt. But revenge doesn't heal anything, Adrian. It doesn't bring back what was lost. Your daughter's case was never solved, Adrian said quietly. Maybe if you'd found the person responsible, you'd feel differently. Maybe. Or maybe I'd have destroyed myself trying to make them pay. Kent's eyes were sad. Don't go down that road. Focus on Ethan, on helping him heal. That's where your energy should go. Adrian nodded, but Kent's words didn't penetrate the cold fury that had taken root in his chest. As he drove home, his mind was already working through possibilities. The FBI would handle the legal aspects. But there were other ways to ensure justice. 3 days later, Adrian stood in Sharon Robbins's nursing home room, watching the woman breathe. She'd regained some consciousness, enough to open her eyes occasionally, but the doctors said her cognitive function was minimal. She couldn't speak, couldn't move her right side. Lori sat beside the bed, reading from a book of poetry her mother had loved. Adrian had insisted on coming, claiming he wanted to be supportive. In truth, he had a different purpose. "I'm going to get some coffee," Lori said after finishing a poem. "Want anything?" "I'm fine. Take your time." As soon as Lori left, Adrian moved closer to the bed. Sharon's eyes were half open, unfocused. He leaned down and spoke softly. "The FBI raided your house yesterday. They found everything. The room, the files, the evidence. They know about Dominic Beasley, Richard Kramer, all of it." Sharon's eyes moved slightly, finding his face. "That's right, you can hear me." "Good." Adrian pulled up a chair and sat. "You're going to die soon, but not before you understand that you failed. Every child you hurt will be identified. Every family will know. Your name will be synonymous with evil." He pulled out his phone and showed her a news headline. "Massive child abuse network uncovered in Portland. Multiple arrests expected. They're not mentioning you by name yet, out of respect for Lori. But that'll change when charges are filed. Everyone will know." Sharon made a sound, a weak groan from the back of her throat. "What's that?" "You're sorry." Adrian smiled coldly. "Too late. 38 years too late. You made a choice with every child you hurt. And now you get to die knowing it was all for nothing. Your legacy is pain, not the respectability you thought you'd built." He stood and leaned close to her ear. "And here's the best part. Lori's going to find out. Your daughter, who loved you more than anything, is going to learn what you really were. That knowledge will destroy her. And it's your fault." Tears leaked from Sharon's eyes, tracking down her wrinkled cheeks. "Yeah," Adrian whispered. "Now you cry. Now you feel something. But it doesn't matter. Nothing you feel matters anymore." He straightened up as footsteps approached in the hallway. Lori returned with 2 coffees, saw her mother crying, and rushed to the bed. "Mom? What's wrong? Are you in pain?" She shot Adrian a confused look. "What happened?" "I don't know," Adrian lied smoothly. "She just started crying. Maybe she's aware enough to be scared." Lori pressed the call button for the nurse, her own tears starting. "It's okay, Mom. We're here. You're not alone." But Sharon's eyes stayed fixed on Adrian, filled with understanding and terror. He'd given her what she deserved, knowledge that she'd lost everything, that her crimes would be exposed, that she would die in disgrace. It wasn't physical suffering, but it was suffering nonetheless. As the nurse came in to check on Sharon, Adrian stepped back and sipped his coffee, feeling a grim satisfaction. This wasn't over yet. He still had plans for the others. The next week moved quickly. The FBI arrested Dominic Beasley in Seattle, charging him with producing and distributing child sexual abuse material. Richard Kramer was disbarred pending a criminal investigation. 3 other men connected to the network were taken into custody. The media picked up the story. News vans parked outside Sharon's farmhouse. Reporters tried to interview neighbors, former colleagues, anyone with a connection. Lori learned the truth when Agent Sanderson came to their house with a victim advocate. Adrian sat beside his wife as the agent explained what her mother had done, watched as Lori's world shattered. She didn't believe it at first, called it impossible, a mistake. But when Sanderson showed her evidence, photos that couldn't be denied, Lori crumbled. "My son," she whispered. "She hurt my son?" "We believe so," Sanderson said gently. "Ethan's been in therapy. With your permission, we'd like to interview him to understand the full extent." Lori looked at Adrian, her face streaked with tears. You knew when you took him to Dr. Mann." "I suspected," Adrian said. "After we found the room. I wanted to get him help immediately." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were already dealing with your mom's health crisis. I wanted to protect you." It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. But Lori was too devastated to push further. She gave permission for Ethan's interview, then excused herself and locked herself in their bedroom. Adrian heard her crying through the door, but knew better than to try to comfort her. There were no words for this kind of betrayal. That night, he slept on the couch. Sharon Robbins died 2 days later, never having been formally charged. The nursing home called early in the morning. Lori didn't want to see the body, couldn't bear to be in the same room with the woman who'd once been her mother. Adrian handled the arrangements. A small cremation, No service. Sharon's ashes would go unclaimed, stored in the funeral home's repository for the unwanted dead. Fitting, Adrian thought. She'd lived for herself, hurt countless children for her own twisted gratification. Let her die unmourned and forgotten. The investigation continued to expand. Agent Sanderson called with updates. More arrests, more victims identified, a network that spanned multiple states. Sharon had been a crucial node in an operation that had existed for decades. Your mother-in-law kept better records than most corporations, Sanderson told Adrian. Because of that, we're able to rescue children currently being exploited and bring closure to cold cases. It's horrific, but at least some good is coming from it. Adrian met with the families of some of Sharon's victims, parents who'd never known what happened to their children, who'd spent years wondering. He gave them what information he could, watched them process the same grief and fury he'd felt. One mother, a woman named Crystal Ferguson whose daughter had been in Sharon's files, thanked him. If you hadn't found that room, she said, we never would have known. We would have spent the rest of our lives wondering where Isabel went. At least now we can bury her, can grieve properly. Her daughter had been one of the 3 missing children, her remains found on property linked to Dominic Beasley. Sharon's notes had led investigators directly to the location. Adrian didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who'd stumbled onto evil and done the bare minimum to stop it. But he accepted Crystal's gratitude because she needed to give it. At home, things remained tense. Lori threw herself into therapy, trying to process her mother's betrayal. She and Adrian barely spoke beyond logistics. Who would pick up Ethan? What was for dinner? Did they need groceries? Their marriage felt like it was held together with frayed thread. One evening, Adrian found Lori in Ethan's room, watching their son sleep. He's so innocent, she whispered. And she took that from him. My own mother. He'll recover, Adrian said quietly. Kids are resilient. And he has us. Does he? Because I feel like I failed him. I brought him to that house. I trusted her with him. You didn't know. I should have. There must have been signs. Sharon was careful. She fooled everyone for 38 years. Adrian moved to stand beside her. Don't blame yourself for her evil. Lori looked at him, her eyes red and tired. Do you blame me? No. Never. But you don't trust me anymore. You didn't tell me what you suspected. You handled it alone. Adrian had no answer for that because it was true. He'd made decisions without her, operated on his own. Maybe that had been necessary. Or maybe it had been a betrayal of its own kind. I'm sorry, he said finally. I did what I thought was right. I know. Lori turned back to Ethan. I just wish it hadn't been necessary. They stood together in the darkness, watching their son breathe, each trapped in their own guilt and grief. 6 months later, the trials began. Dominic Beasley received 40 years for trafficking and production of abuse material. Richard Kramer got 15 years for obstruction and conspiracy. 7 other men connected to the network were convicted and sentenced. The media coverage was intense. Sharon Robbins's name became infamous, a cautionary tale about hidden evil. The farmhouse was demolished, the land sold to a developer who planned to build a park in memory of the victims. Ethan continued therapy. Slowly, his nightmares decreased. He still had bad days, moments when something would trigger a memory and he'd withdraw. But Dr. Mann said he was making progress. He'd never forget what happened, but he could learn to live with it. Adrian and Lori's marriage survived, though it was changed. They were more careful with each other now, more honest. The crisis had forced them to communicate in ways they'd avoided before. I used to think my mom was the strongest woman I knew, Lori told him one night. Now I realize she was just the cruelest. And I'm terrified I might have some of that in me. You're nothing like her, Adrian said firmly. You're kind, loving, protective. Everything she wasn't. I hope you're right. Adrian thought about the things he'd said to Sharon in her hospital bed, the satisfaction he'd felt in her fear. Was he really so different? He'd wanted revenge, had taken a dark pleasure in her suffering. But he'd channeled that into action that helped others. He'd worked within the system, trusted the FBI to do their jobs. He'd chosen justice over vengeance. Mostly, Kent Field stopped by their house one evening, bringing files to close out his investigation. He sat with Adrian on the back porch while Lori put Ethan to bed. You did good work, Kent said. Because you acted quickly and documented everything. We saved kids who were currently being exploited. That's not nothing. It doesn't feel like enough, Adrian admitted. It never does. But you got justice for Ethan. That's what matters. Adrian looked at Kent. Did you ever find out what happened to your daughter? Kent's expression darkened. No. 14 years, no answers. But working cases like yours, it helps. Gives me purpose. They sat in silence for a moment. Two men bound by the children they'd failed to protect and were now trying to save. The FBI found something else in Sharon's files, Kent said eventually. References to someone called the Collector. Someone higher up the network who Sharon answered to. They haven't identified him yet. Will they? Maybe. These investigations take years. But if they do, they'll bring him down too. Kent stood. Just thought you'd want to know. In case you ever hear anything. After Kent left, Adrian sat alone on the porch, thinking. The Collector. Someone out there who'd coordinated this network, who'd profited from children's suffering on an even larger scale than Sharon. Part of him wanted to help find this person, to ensure they faced justice. But another part, the part that had learned hard lessons, knew that wasn't his fight. He'd done what he could. The rest was up to the authorities. His responsibility now was to his family, to helping Ethan heal, to rebuilding his marriage, to being present in ways he hadn't always been. As he went inside and climbed the stairs to check on his son, Adrian made a decision. He would let go of the rage he'd been carrying. He would trust that justice would find its way, even if it wasn't as swift or complete as he wanted. Sharon Robbins was dead. Her co-conspirators were in prison. Ethan was getting better. It would have to be enough. 2 years passed. Ethan started first grade, a bright, curious boy who still had nightmares sometimes, but was learning to manage them. He'd made friends, joined a soccer team, and laughed more often than he cried. Lori had written a memoir about her experience, not for publication, just for herself. Processing the betrayal, the guilt, the slow journey toward forgiveness. She'd started volunteering at a crisis center for children, using her pain to help others. Adrian got promoted at work, took on more responsibilities. He and Lori had started talking about having another child, though they were taking it slow. Life had found a new normal. Then Adrian received a call from Agent Sanderson. We found him, Sanderson said without preamble. The Collector. His real name is Orlando Donahue. He's in custody. Adrian's hand tightened on the phone. How? Digital forensics traced financial transactions. Donahue ran the whole operation from a mansion in California, presenting himself as a legitimate businessman. But he was the one coordinating everything, recruiting abusers, distributing material, collecting payments. We estimate he was involved with over 200 children over 3 decades. 200 children. The number was staggering. What happens now? Adrian asked. Trial. We have overwhelming evidence, including testimony from people you helped us arrest. Donahue will spend the rest of his life in prison. Good. There's something else, Sanderson said. In Donahue's records, we found references to Sharon Robbins. He'd marked her as one of his most reliable associates. There are emails discussing Ethan specifically. Donahue had planned to recruit him into the network as he got older. Adrian felt sick. They were grooming him. Yes, but because you found that room when you did, because you acted, we stopped that from happening. Ethan is safe. So are dozens of other children who were targeted. After the call ended, Adrian sat in his office, processing. He'd saved his son from a fate worse than what he'd already endured. The discovery at the farmhouse, as terrible as it had been, had prevented even greater horrors. That night, he told Lori about the call. She cried. But this time the tears weren't just grief. There was relief there too. We did the right thing, she said. Everything we went through, all the pain, it meant something. It did, Adrian agreed. Later, after Lori was asleep, Adrian went to Ethan's room. His son was sprawled across the bed, one arm flung over his stuffed dinosaur. Peaceful. Safe. Adrian thought about all the paths this could have taken. If he'd ignored the foreman's call. If he'd called the police immediately without investigating. If he'd given in to his desire for personal revenge instead of working within the system. Any of those choices might have led to a different outcome, worse for Ethan or for other children. Instead, he'd chosen the harder path, patience, documentation, trusting others to help. And it had worked. He leaned down and kissed his son's forehead. I've got you, he whispered. Always. As Adrian returned to bed and lay beside his wife, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not complete. The scars would always be there. But peace nonetheless. Sharon Robbins was dead and forgotten. Her network was destroyed. The children she'd hurt had been identified and given resources to heal. And Ethan, brave, resilient Ethan, was safe. Justice had been served. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. And for Adrian Park, who'd started this journey in rage and ended it in hope, that was more than enough. It was everything. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.